activate my mic. So we're at 6:30, so I'd like to call our meeting to order and welcome everyone. Can we please stand for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Diana, if you would please call the roll.
Committee Member Schell. Committee Member Middlestad.
Here.
Committee Member Huber.
Here.
Committee Member McMorris.
Here.
Chair Gordon.
Here. I would like to make a motion to excuse Tim, who knew he wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we have excused Tim for his absence tonight. Mr. Green, are there any late changes to the agenda?
There are no late changes to the agenda.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's look at the agenda. We are going to approve the minutes from last time unless there is discussion of the minutes from last time. Has everyone had a chance to take a peek and see that the minutes reflected accurately our last meeting in May? Mm-hmm. All right, I would welcome a motion to approve those minutes then.
I propose to approve the minutes.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor of approving last month's minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries and the minutes from last month are approved. All right, is there anyone requesting to speak to the committee regarding items not subject to specific public hearing? You can come forward. I don't see anyone in the audience. Is there anyone online, Diana?
I do not see anybody.
Okay. All right, so I think we can move on to item 4, which is business. This is the continued discussion of South Royal Road at South Wells, and I'm going to turn it over to Chuck and I believe Jane as well.
Thank you. I will go ahead and start. Last time mentioned that we had we're contracting with Jane Tessner Kleiner of Nature's Play Designs. And sitting alongside me last month was Sunrise O'Mahony to talk with you about water conservation and then help me relay that discussion. We subsequently met with Jane to bring her on board and catch her up on the discussion of last month. Jane then met with our operations crew chief, Kelly Melroy, with his experience specifically on the roundabout in question to get an idea what's there, what constraints there are, utilities and all sorts of things. And so she has had a chance to take in all of that information, and we forwarded earlier today a presentation that she has. She will go, I'm just going to turn it over to her. Jane and I did talk before, and you guys like to have dialogue, as we've seen over the months. So I encouraged her to kind of start going through and just encourage the dialogue, just feel like jumping right in when you see something you want to comment on. So I'm just going to turn it over to Jane right now.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to work and support your committee and Chuck with this project. And I've put together a package that has questions for you, things to think about, as well as making sure that we've documented all of your ideas, concerns, opportunities, and then just some very draft sketches of some ideas that we could consider moving forward. So on page 2 of your document is the project background, and I've, based on the conversations with Chuck and Kelly and some of the notes that Chuck forwarded to me, I've documented what I believe are the goals, objectives, and some project examples from your round community. And knowing that you have several roundabouts already planted and several in the works, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with the project goals and objectives. And as I've discussed with Chuck, low maintenance is always key. Safety is always key. So safe, nothing that's going to grow into the the line of traffic or block the view of sight where there needs to be view of sight is always very important. Minimal maintenance, so plants that are selected will be chosen to grow successfully in that space, not need to be pruned. I know you have some examples of your other roundabouts that have a lot of pruning needs. Using native plants where possible, locally sourced and indigenous to this region. And we have lots of great examples in the natural areas surrounding the community. And then celebrate and enhance the neighborhood. So this is a newer part of the neighborhood development, and we want to make sure that it fits with the aesthetics that the neighborhood would appreciate and minimize the calls to the city of, hey, what's going on over there? We just want it to be a successful project. So on page 2, I've listed a few questions and would love any feedback just to make sure that we're on the right track from the big picture level. So things that you like, things that you've seen in previous examples, whether it's Ridgefield or other communities, like please don't ever do that. And I, just from the onset, I know that we've talked about community art and using historic agricultural elements. I did not include that in this proposal tonight, just because we're kind of talking about the big picture and some planting. We can get into the art as a next step, but let's start with kind of the big picture and make sure we're on track. So I would love to hear any feedback you have to make sure that we've got the objectives and goals headed in the right direction.
All right, so committee members, the questions that are up there in that right corner, those are some things you could maybe share your ideas about based on the work we've done so far or the other roundabouts, and just give Jane anything that you think is especially important for her to know.
I think it's important to know that it's windy, as you notice, but up in that area,
Yeah.
there's a lot of wind. So the trees, and I've noticed in some of the, I live in the area, I think someone else does here too.
Yeah.
And if you notice some of the trees where they're planted and the wind hits them a lot, they start to bend.
Yes.
So I think that's an important, just a consideration.
Okay, great. I was down at the food carts and I noticed all the trees started really kind of catching that wind. Good to know, thank you.
I will say for myself that I am more a fan of the natural look. The manicured and trimmed seems like a lot of effort. It is more maintenance. I don't feel it's as environmentally friendly, and we've kind of been having that dialogue for the whole time we've been together about trying to make things that will host some of our native invertebrates and birds. And I have not, I mean, aesthetically, I've not been a big fan of the grapevines. I know it's kind of a cool community project, so I love that aspect of it, but I think those have been a little hard to kind of keep them looking real appealing for a lot of the year. So I've been enjoying the roundabouts where there is more greenery for sure, and I'm always a big fan of flowers, so that's just off the top of my head in reply to those questions.
I think we really need to emphasize height in the roundabouts, not only because one of the goals is to obstruct the line of sight from one side of the roundabout to the other to make sure that people don't perceive it as something that they can drive across, but also for visual interest. Our first roundabout is the one over by the new Costco, and it was our first roundabout, and we had to get the whole thing decided in one night. So it's, you know, it's okay considering that, but it's pretty underwhelming visually. And part of that, I think, is because it's quite flat. And so, and because the plants are still a little on the small side, there's just not very much to see at all. So I think that we need to emphasize height as much as we can by mounding things, which we are in our new roundabout. Possibly doing tiers, like the roundabout you see in the top right image.
The one near Rosars.
Yeah, no, not necessarily exactly like that, but the idea of tiers, and by using tall trees, I think that it's really important for it to be interesting at all.
So just to jump in, first, we are currently talking with our Pioneer Widening contractor to come in and redo the Costco roundabout. It just, we were underwhelmed ourselves, and we think things should be higher up so you can actually see them.
Yeah.
So we're gonna rebuild it.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And hopefully they'll come. The one in the upper right is the Royal Pioneer Roundabout. It's about 18 years old, was the first one city ever built, probably one of the first in Southwest Washington that was built as a roundabout. And so that's, you're kind of seeing the old and the new, I guess.
Sure, yeah, I understand that the plants need time to grow, of course.
Yeah, it filled in really nicely for 18 years of growth. That looks really good. Okay.
Dan, did you want to?
No, it's all
weigh in?
good.
And Kathleen, do you have something else?
Well, I know when I look at it, it's hard for me to think about, you're gonna have you're going to install now a barrier, right? The 2-foot high one, so that it'll be higher because of that. And, that's gonna limit that 50 feet again down to what, 48? So I am a little concerned with size. When the group starts talking about trees and shrubbery. And I'm a fan of a couple of the trees that were suggested that provided birds food, and some of the smaller bushes also. So I thought that was nice. Plus some of the lower flowering ones were good for the RBs. So I liked that, and they provided interest in different textures and colors in the fall.
If I'm not
Not
mistaken,
necessarily
Jane will now
evergreen,
take us
yeah.
through each possible
certainly.
concept, so we can kind of like
Yeah.
see the differences.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's great feedback. And there is no particular order. Just
Okay.
want to make sure that we're covering all the bases. So if somebody comes back and did you think about, we want to make sure that we document the issues as we come up with them. So on page 3, under project input, these are the notes that I put together from the various conversations that we've had. There are other pieces to some of these, but these are the general concepts. Once again, safety is always first and foremost important, not only for the drivers, but most for the staff who will be in there maintaining. So on the right side of that page, you'll see the construction documents, and then down below is the aerial photograph. All those lines that go through there are a lot of utilities, and there are a lot of utility boxes. We had a conversation with Kelly about, as that 2-foot knee wall goes in, that I think you have going in at that big one, close to Royal on Pioneer. So have an idea of what a 2-foot knee wall looks like. They will raise the elevation of those lids up so that it doesn't have to be mounted from the ground, so you don't lose that kind of slope. So everything will get elevated 2 feet up, which gives us that height advantage you were discussing earlier. But we do need to be able to get access to those manholes, those box covers, et cetera. So there's irrigation on the south side of the circle. There's the big fat line is a storm drain, and there's a manhole on the west side. Sorry, north is to the right on the picture. Sorry, I forgot to put my north arrow on this. I'll update that. There's communication and there's water lines going through there. So there's a lot going on. And obviously, safety of the workers as they're in there is key, and picking the right plants with the right roof system so that we don't impact all that utility work. So there are plants that we can choose that are not going to seek the water and try to break the lines and all that kind of thing. So we'll be very thoughtful about the plant selection in that regard. And most of our native plants are not going to break the lines like a willow would. A willow is great at breaking water lines and sewer lines. Like I said, I did not include anything about the art or the cultural aspect yet. We can discuss that as we move through the scenarios. We'll talk about the aesthetics of each of these. When we were speaking with Kelly, he's a native of Ridgefield, and he really likes the Pacific Northwest character of the firs and the oaks. Obviously, this roundabout is not big enough for an oak that will get really big over time, even though they do have a lovely deep taproot that wouldn't bother the pipes. But, we have room for fir trees or other climate-adapted evergreen trees that, as we know, the range for certain species, like cedar trees that are very historically significant here, are actually not becoming as adaptive to grow successfully here in this region. I know that they are still being planted around the region, but they're going to struggle more than, say, a pine. So we're actually borrowing from some of the high desert area of Oregon and Washington, so we can consider some of those species that will adapt to that changing climate that we anticipate will come, especially since this is a very open and exposed, as you mentioned, the wind, the sun, so they're going to have to be pretty hardy plants as we go in. We want to pick blooms, as you mentioned, that have beauty all year round. It's not just beautiful for us to look at as we drive by, but also great for all that wildlife. We are on the migratory bird route, of course, so birds can stop in the tall trees, take a break, look for berries and food. So we have a great palette of plants that we can pick from there. I'm a huge fan of planting in clusters, not just one plant here, one plant there. That helps the maintenance staff if they do have to go in and weed. If this cluster looks like this and something doesn't, then that makes it really easy for the staff who may not be as familiar with the plant species, especially the native species. So planting in clusters, I usually like to plant low by the knee wall, medium, and then tall in the center, which works well for where the utility locations are. And then, let's see. There is irrigation lines stubbed into the circle, so we'll be able to tap into irrigation to get those plants established. Given that we are just sitting through 2 days of 94 to 96 degrees, we can anticipate these hot summers will continue. Most of our plants are taking at least 3 to 5 years, especially the trees, to get established, but then we'll pick drought-tolerant species so that hopefully we can turn off the water at some point and let them just do their thing. Back to that water conservation piece. As I mentioned, low maintenance plants so that the crews do not have to worry about pruning unless there's a hazard branch or something that falls, but the intent is to not have to have anybody go out in there and prune them. I know that some people like their shrubs pruned into shapes, balls or boxes or squares. That's a conversation we can have. We can definitely pick plants that you could do that, but as I understand it, we're moving a little bit toward a more natural look, so I will probably recommend plants that don't need to be pruned into shapes, but if that's what, that on page 2, that upper right, that Pioneer circle does have some of those plants that are typically pruned. So those are just a highlight of the conversations that we've heard from so far, but if there's something else that we want to make sure that gets documented in the input beyond what we just talked about, I would love to make sure that we get that all included before we go into the concepts.
I had one question.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
Okay. It said here, consider local regional artists to add painting to the knee wall to celebrate the region's history. I was surprised about that, a painting aspect.
That's something that we might have talked about in one of our discussions about, and I know that the city of Vancouver and I think it's in Washougal, there's an example where those low concrete walls are a great palette for a nice painting to kind of, I know that they'll have reflectors along the edges so people will see them, but to add some art to it would also kind of soften the concrete appearance of that very wide concrete surface. So
I'm just curious about that.
yeah, just something to kind of soften the look a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would just say too that I really do like that idea that your design often emphasizes the layering and height in the middle and medium to low. I think that makes a lot of sense for a roundabout. And I also like the idea that there would be a mix of evergreen and non-evergreen plants just so that there continues to be some greenery throughout the year.
Yes.
I think is nice. So those are just a couple of observations.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with native plantings, a lot are perennials that die back, and then it just looks like bare dirt, and people will say, hey, city, why'd you let those plants die or whatever? So you kind of tuck those perennials behind an evergreen, so when they do die back, folks just see the evergreen. And then all of a sudden, boom, they pop right back up. It's like, oh, yeah, I forgot that was there. So just kind of hide the evidence so people don't get as concerned. One of the other things I always want to mention to folks as they move towards native plantings is giving those cues to care is a term that we use in the industry, that this is an intentional look. This is very much on purpose. So when you cluster them in large groupings, 3, 5, 7, et cetera, that gives it a look of intentionality. So it's not looking like a meadow per se, that some folks think might look a little too messy for a city or county infrastructure. So we're trying to find that blend of natural, native with a well-kept space. Once again, we don't want the city's phone ringing with, why aren't you taking care of those weeds? Well, they're not weeds. They're plants that we picked intentionally. And there's things that we can add, like birdhouses or little things that may or may not get used, but they add the intentional that this is very much on purpose. We can add a couple of pieces of logs or a couple of artistic boulders to the design. Once again, just to give that very natural, this is intentional look to it.
That's really good to hear. Because that's something that we've talked about a lot, is that we want to have native plants and have a low maintenance, less manicured look, and a forest floor ideal, but that we don't want it to look messy.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's really great to hear that.
good. Not messy, got it. I'm still trying to convince my husband in 25 years that this is all intentional. Okay, so I provided 3 concepts, very quick sketches, with a plan view in the upper right of each page, 4, 5, and 6, and then a quick sketch that I did for each of the concepts. The first being kind of very much similar to what was on Pioneer, with a few taller evergreens with maybe a couple of lower deciduous trees where there's a vine maple. I'm a huge fan of, if it's a deciduous where the leaves fall, that we use a tree that has smaller leaves so the crews don't have to go in and rake it. It just adds to the nutrients of the soil and to the habitat, and they're not gonna blow and block the street or the storm drains. That's a big no-no. So kind of a serviceberry has a very small leaf. So just kind of layering those trees and shrubs so they really blend in. For tight spaces like this, when you look at a lot of city landscapes across the US, you tend to plant a tree like one every 25 feet. For this kind of scenario, I would actually plant evergreens about 10 or 15 feet apart, like create a little triangle in there so you get a nice dense pocket. One of the things we talked about is do not create something that is attractive for somebody to go cross into traffic and then climb into the space. So we really want to pack it so it looks like it's not a place for kids to go hide in or create a camp in there or a fort or anything. So if we planted a little denser, then maybe you might see in another kind of city installation that would help make it not an attractive problem for folks. So when you look at the upper right, it's kind of densely planted with some different layers of plants around it. You can see by the various colors in the plan view looking down on it. So that one is kind of replicating kind of a more classic Pacific Northwest look. Concept B is kind of similar, but using taller deciduous and taller shrubs. Kind of a row of deciduous down the middle going north to south with some taller shrubs. I think like a red flowering currant. The Oregon grape is an evergreen. The huckleberries are evergreen. Douglas spirea, buckbrush. So just really making sure there's lots of evergreen, but also some flowering things that will bloom and blossom all throughout the year. And then around the edge, you can put a lot of lower things that really will add that color throughout the year. And then the third concept is a lower version that would still block visual impact, because once again, we're starting that black line is that 2-foot elevation, and then you add a layers, and then you can just do kind of that medium height shrubs that's taller than what you would see with that first roundabout with the vines off of Pioneer, but it gets taller than that, so we can go like maybe 8 or up to about 8 feet tall, and it still provides that visual block, but it doesn't get super high. Once again, we're in a neighborhood where a lot of folks don't have really dense planting, so I wanted to make sure there's an option that is not over the top Pacific Northwest and is more maintained, or a lower level, and then something in between. So there's lots of ways to go with this. And then on page 7, I provided just some examples of some trees that I really like and some plants that I think that would really look great in here. Things like the wild lilac, the Indian plum, the mock orange, the shore pine, I think, is a really great choice. It's tall, but it's really adapted to that climate change where we're getting the hotter summers. The western crabapple is beautiful, and the berries are very small, but you get the, excuse me for geeking out on birds, but the cedar waxwings. Heather and I were just talking about that this morning about, you know, getting some of those migratory birds in here to really enjoy those berries, but not create something that somebody wants to personally go in and harvest. So you can see in the photos there's lots of color to choose from. I did include OSU extension. This is one of my favorite graphics for native plants, where you can see the plants in the bloom colors, in the bloom cycles. So there's something we can choose to bloom all year round for the Pacific Northwest, and would be great choices here for this piece. So that's kind of overview of the concepts and some of the thinking behind it. I think you're going to get a beautiful result. A lot of the plants that I'm talking about and have shown here are locally available, not only from our local nurseries, which our local native nurseries have smaller stock, but Portland Nursery or Yard and Garden or Dennis 70s has taller species, so you can get more of an impact right away. So yeah, so there's lots to choose from, but once again, safety, low maintenance, and not something that's going to create an attractive nuisance for folks are kind of the key. So,
Jane, just going back one page of on the bulleted list, it says oak, vine, maple as it did with concept B, but I'm guessing that actually wasn't intended to be there.
Sorry. Good catch. Yeah, please.
So it really would start with the large shrubs, which is evergreen shrubs like wild lilac and the manzanita.
Yes, I apologize. On page 6, that first bullet should not be there.
Okay.
Good catch. Thank you. For C, I'm sorry, yeah. Page 6, concept C, not using the large oak or maple. Good catch.
So at this point, Jane, do you want additional, I mean, I'm not just trying to think what the next step would be here.
So the next steps could be, well, I'll leave it up to Chuck if there's additional public outreach and input that we would like to get beyond this committee.
Well, this is the public outreach process.
Okay.
So,
Just wanna make sure.
yes, I would suggest, it would be nice to kind of narrow down. I think eventually council would like to see 1 or 2 concepts instead of 3. But also make sure you don't walk away from that discussion of the farm art that was brought up early on in this process. Is that something to incorporate or not? As you know, and could it be on the knee wall that you do some type of farm art or history wheel or something like that?
Well, if our goal in part is to maybe narrow, maybe we should, as a committee, just begin to talk about things we like or prefer in terms of the 3 concepts. I'm gonna go to Dan first, actually, just because I haven't heard his voice yet tonight, and I'm just wondering if you have any immediate thoughts, Dan. If you don't, it's fine,
Well, I'm conflicted
okay.
because I kind of warmed up to the idea of some larger farm visual that would create a historic point of interest artistically, or either, you know, some old piece of equipment that would create conversation about our past. On the other hand, having driven through there, the roundabout's not very large. To me, a vertical greenery would be aesthetically nice. So I'm kind
Yeah,
of,
okay.
I'm kind of conflicted
No, that's
between those
helpful.
two thoughts. I feel like a knee wall with some art on it probably wouldn't be that effective for the visual, but it might be. I don't know. Maybe it's hard to imagine how these things will turn out.
If I can respond, because those are great comments. The one thing we talked about, and if you've had kids and you've been going to the zoo for a long time, there used to be a tractor down by the petting zoo that everybody would put their kid on every year to see how much they've grown by sitting on the tractor. And that went away as they redid some of the elephant exhibits, et cetera. So the one thing we talked about is if there is equipment out there that looks like it can be sat on. Now, there's other pieces of farm equipment that, you're not gonna attract somebody trying to sit on it. That if somebody has something to donate, that would be great to consider, but we just wanted to avoid attracting, and I can say this as a mom of teenagers going out there on a Friday night taking pictures sitting on the tractor as cars are whizzing by. So that's just something to consider. We have space, we can incorporate it and plant around it for sure, and under it, to minimize feet trying to get to it. And even make it look like, we can plant native grass so it looks like it's moving through the field. We could totally do that. It just, what type of equipment is available to incorporate and how best to use it. So I'm not opposed to using that. It's just a question for the maintenance crews as to what would not become an attractive nuisance.
We don't know what this farm equipment is, so that somebody was the former mayor. He had some antique farm equipment that had been found in the area at some point, and he thought it was his idea that we could use it in the roundabout. But unfortunately, we don't know what it is, or what size it is, or what it looks like. I don't think it was anything like a tractor, though. That wasn't the impression I got. And so at our last meeting, we threw around some ideas of paying tribute to the history of agriculture in the area with some art. Maybe something on the knee wall itself or on top of the knee wall, like some laser cut metal shapes or something like that, which wouldn't reduce the amount of space that we have for greenery. I love the first concept. I am a big fan of the Pacific Northwest forested look, and I would love to advocate bringing it back wherever we can. But I know that some people would like more of an emphasis on art, I think. But I love the bigger trees, the better.
And there is an example on Evergreen Road over I-5 in Vancouver. It's about a 2-foot high wall going across that does have art on it, and it's really beautiful. It's really effective. It's of flowers and plants because they redid all those planters there. But if you want, I can send you a picture of what that looks like to see. Like, you can't fit a lot of art in 2 foot tall with a really long space. So if you have an artist in mind that could generate kind of that historic theme, I think you could very effectively, especially since the roundabout is elevated off the curb anyway, so the knee wall will go above that, so it's going to be up a little higher. You just have to plan for the reflectors that will be in the art.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture of what's on Evergreen. And I know there's, just having worked with the refuge staff, there's lots of amazing artists in this community that have some amazing ideas for locally important artwork, so.
Do you want to weigh in? Okay. I was going to say I'm also a big fan of the first concept. When I saw this, I was just like, whoa, because I drive by that roundabout. It's I have to pass it to go to my house, going anywhere, and it's just been so barren, and all the houses have gone in, and it seems like the number of trees we have to look at has just gone down, and the trees that we're replacing with are obviously small right now. These would be small for a while too. But I love the tallness of this. I love the idea of those smaller trees, smaller leaved trees that would be with it. I did sort of feel, as I looked at that, I was like, well, I'm not so wedded to having farm equipment in the middle. I do think it would be interesting, and I'm thinking Diana could pull it up. Tim Shell did share with us a picture of something that was done in Bend that does have, but I guess what I would go to is actually the size of that roundabout to me just doesn't seem like the right size to have like some sort of sculpture of farm equipment. It seems like there's someplace else in the city maybe that belongs, maybe down at Waterfront Park or something. But I love the idea of emphasizing the greenery. If we want to do some art along the bottom, it definitely simplifies the planning process. And maybe it's just because I have a hard time visualizing. I think the compromise you're suggesting, Jane, if there's a way to do, and Kelly, you as well, maybe that would be workable. But I also really like concept 1, and my second choice would probably be concept 2. I like that one as well.
So on behalf of staff, I think I would suggest that we don't put any attractive nuisance out there, which includes
Any kind of,
three-dimensional
okay,
equipment. Two-dimensional art does allow you to still have the image and allows you not to take up a lot of space, and kids aren't going to go play on two-dimensional art as much.
okay, so then maybe I'll not request that we look at the other image for now.
But again, it's trying to, I know we have a canoe at 35th.
Yeah.
Remains to be seen what happens with that, but
Yeah.
we have the two-dimensional art at the new Pioneer Roundabout.
Yeah.
So we're okay with that one. I also want to note that we've had some neighbors of yours, Heather, out at Ridgefield Heights, who were bemoaning there were trees that were cut down with phase 1 of Ridgefield Heights, and
Yep.
this might be an opportunity to mitigate for that at this roundabout.
I was
Since
very
it's kind of the
familiar with that
gateway.
stand of 24 Doug firs. It was really tragic that got lost. But yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Kathleen?
okay. So I just wanted to ask that the list that you provided, the root system on all of this would be okay? Everything you,
Yes.
yes, I assumed that when you were talking, so that's okay. Again, I too want something that perhaps would be on top of the knee wall, which would maybe keep kids from running into it, even when a parent would walk by, for instance, even though I wouldn't anticipate that happening. So whether embedded in it, but maybe on top of it, something maybe in a quarter. Every quarter it has something that as a piece of equipment, or that like we had discussed, or I brought up anyway, the name of large farmers that were here. So it's historical in that regard. Something simple, but it does the job. So I was, and I don't agree. I don't think a piece of equipment is a good idea. I really don't. At first I thought it might be nice, but I really do. When you look at this, the design, I love A. I was only concerned about the roots and just how big these trees get. And I know they live forever, but over time, would there be a problem with them when they got really old? Would that cause a problem? Because I really don't know. I mean, Douglas fir can get huge, so it was my only concern about that. It's not as they're growing, but when they reach maturity. I like that. I think they're beautiful. It's beautiful. And I also liked B a lot. It's just hard to decide which one would be better. My only concern about the firs is if they got so large, would they be in the end a problem? And then I would feel so awful. I mean, I know that might sound silly, but I would feel awful if the largeness of that tree that we thought would be great in the end ends up having it to be removed. And that would bother me.
I totally agree. I've seen many projects. I mean, I've been in business for 30 years, and I have seen projects where somebody who wasn't involved in the process thought it was the wrong something, and it got removed, and then you have contention, which is not the intent. So I'm actually leaning more towards pines, because they will not get quite as statuesque as a fir tree, and we all know When we get those big, huge storms in November, we lose lots of branches, so your crews are going out sweeping up all around all the roundabouts for all the materials that get blown off. So once again, probably not so much in the first 20 years, but after that, probably a lot of branches go flying in those big storms.
So,
So, I have a question about the pines. So the pines, is it their better nature to be in groups, and would be 3 enough, given
Yeah,
that would be fine for them?
Yes, yeah.
They'd be healthy?
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, and just to pile on with the Douglas firs, I used to be the Clark County Transportation Manager in the 90s, and we had a number of windstorms where there were solitary fir trees, Douglas firs, they would knock over.
Yeah,
They prefer to be in groups.
yeah,
Okay.
And so that's kind of my experience I would throw out there.
yeah, totally.
yeah, and that's when we plant trees of this nature, planting them in groups, they really do intertwine their root systems.
Oh, good.
And we now know from research that trees do talk to each other and they help each other stay put. So that's why a cluster of 3 of whatever species we pick. But, 50 years from now, who knows what to expect. We'll all be elsewhere. But those big branches that come blowing off in that first roundabout that you showed, Chuck, that's 18 years old, I imagine that gets some branches blown off in those big storms.
Yeah. But for the most part, they're fine.
That roundabout, Diane, if you could go back to the one that shows the Royal Pioneer Roundabout, that one actually has stood up to the test of time. I'm not aware that it's been damaged by wind as far as knocking over the trees or branches. It seems to want to be damaged by errant vehicles. So I don't know what types of trees those are.
They're actually sequoia and
All right.
maple, and those tall skinny ones are kind of those Italian looking, they're in the cedar family. So you actually have sequoia, talk about tall, those will get really huge, and you've got maple trees in there, so I'm sure those are beautiful red in the fall, especially on the right there. That's a maple tree. I made sure I did my botany as I drove around that this evening. So yeah, sequoias are less likely to lose their branches like a fir tree, but pines typically will not lose their branches like a fir tree will either.
Is the sequoia root system?
Really good deep root system. I mean, that's why the redwood, I mean, they're a redwood tree, right? So
Right, well, yeah.
so they have that longevity
Uh-huh.
rooted for them, literally.
They're beautiful, and that would be a consistency. That would be kind of,
But
maybe that
I'm
would be nice.
wondering,
The
do you-
variety's nice too.
Do you predict that the size of these trees is gonna outgrow that space within the next decade or 2?
Those ones, because they grow up before they grow out.
Okay,
So the sequoias in that example are gonna get tall, but not so much wider. If you've ever been to Esther Short Park down in the city of Vancouver, most of those are sequoia trees as well.
Oh.
And the thing about the evergreens, especially from a maintenance perspective, you can limb up from the bottom without hurting the tree at all.
Yeah.
And it still gives room for those other plants to grow around while allowing the maintenance crews to get in and service the utilities as well, so. This roundabout that we're talking about tonight is smaller than that one,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm not as likely to suggest a sequoia for this project. Just not enough space to put 3 together.
Would there ever be a problem with the fact that if we choose the pine, that the needles falling after a time would impact the soil and then make it difficult if it's more acidic?
No,
No? Okay.
no. Yeah, every evergreen will shed its needles at some point.
Right.
Especially as there's new growth, but they won't dramatically change the soil
Okay.
context. Great point, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
well, it seems that we do really like A overall. I think, was that your choice of the 3 as well, Dan? If you had to choose?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, even though, I understand you're making the mental adjustment because we had that other vision for a while. But it does sound like that vision is probably not practical for this area, for this roundabout.
Well, I'm interested in the art on the face of the
Yeah.
new wall. If we could look at that too, that'd be
Yeah.
interesting.
I was wondering, and maybe this is like being too, I was kind of, when I see that classic tall tree and all that, I think more of the period of time when the area was more inhabited by Native Americans than by farmers. So I'm almost wondering, is there like, does anybody feel like, would it be odd to have farming imagery next to that style of plantings? Is that kind of a weird thing to think about? I don't know, that just crossed my mind.
That's an interesting point. Well, perhaps the fact that you're using the native trees themselves balances it somewhat, would it?
We could have some images of farming and some images of indigenous scenes. I don't know what it might be, what they might have. And so it's more of a theme of the history of the area rather than agriculture. It's just an idea.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to start over with a whole new concept at this point.
And I would suggest that, a quick question for Chuck is if there's other roundabout projects that we don't have to try to solve every theme with this specific project. Once again, there's a lot of utilities here, so if there's other roundabout projects coming forward that might be able to address some of the other issues that might have more space to adapt some of these other ideas?
Well, we don't have any others under construction or planned for a while. However, it doesn't mean that this is the last roundabout ever. The one that people keep asking about is us to move up the street to the one at Royal and Third by Rosauers. I don't know if I think that one might be similar size to this one. What I don't know is what's underneath it.
Is that one currently grass?
It's grass and some, well, you had a picture of it, some shrubbery. It really has not had a lot of tender loving care. And so people have been asking for that one to be the next one from this committee.
Oh, this one,
Yeah, that's the one on the lower right.
yeah.
I really like the historic idea of multiple time periods. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, keep in mind that this area, we've talked a little bit about the indigenous history, but you know, we also had mills in the area. We
Yeah.
had along the waterfront. We've had the potato fields. We've had, trying to think what else we've had in the area. I know that to talk to Dr. Cruzan, I think we had a nursery where kind of right next to where Costco's gone. There used to be a nursery there, I think. So trees are definitely part of our history. I think the other thing to keep in mind is if you go west from this roundabout, you go into what's called the G Creek Plateau. We used to call it the donut hole.
Yeah.
But this is kind of becoming the gateway to the G Creek Plateau, which has been more of a rural feel to it. I don't know about farming. Heather, you probably know more about the history in the last 50 years there, but definitely it's kind of a rural feel in that area.
Yeah, I know the property I'm on was part of a larger farm, but it was owned by one person. He was farming, I think it was the family farm, and they had different areas so it got subdivided up. I think Mr. Wells, one of the reasons he's interested in having that farming thing right there is because isn't his farm kind of close to that area, or was?
Yeah, he still farms in kind of the southeast area, southeast from this, not too far.
Yeah.
But all the land where, Seven Wells,
Yeah.
that used to be his property.
Right.
And Seven Wells doesn't refer to water wells, it refers to seven of Lee Wells' family. There's 7 members, him and his wife, Jerry, and 5 kids. So that's the 7 Wells.
Okay.
If I can add one more comment about the art on the knee wall, being that the first priority of this is to move traffic through safely, And obviously, eyes need to be on the pedestrians that are crossing. I can't remember if there's a hawk light for people to pass, so there's no traffic control for pedestrians. And as that part of the community grows out and gets built out, there's just gonna be a lot more foot traffic. And so we really want cars to focus on where they're going. And if you put too much of interest visually, it might detract from the safety part. So that's just a balancing act of what you think is appropriate for this location.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and weigh in. I know council has said they'd rather keep things from not getting too busy in the middle, but there is a desire to keep things rather opaque. The crosswalks, if you go out there, you'll see the crosswalks are actually kind of moved away from the roundabout.
Yeah.
They do have markings, they do have yield signs. The next step is if we have issues, we go to what's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or RRFB. We have those at Royal now. And unfortunately they get stuck, but won't use that push button again. But that would be the next step if we have issues with pedestrians. At this point, I know we have a lot of pedestrians crossing here, but I'm not aware that that would be a site, if making the middle more opaque it would become a sight distance issue. We just want to make sure we keep it from getting busy, so that the more busy it is, the more it does take driver's eyes off looking ahead.
As somebody who loves art, I'm always like, ooh, what's that? I'm like,
So there was an example that we were gonna share, right, where it was done?
not on a roundabout, but on a wall to show
Oh,
the
I see.
capacity
I see.
of art. Actually, I think there is an example in Bend. Now I'm thinking of the new roundabouts in Bend that have lots of art, but they have a lot of
do.
metal sculpture art.
Yeah, that's what this
Yeah,
was.
Yeah, that's
That's what
tall.
this was.
I can't remember if they have any painted art on those.
They have such a variety, but
but,
their roundabouts seem like they're really big
Yeah,
compared
Yes,
to this one.
right.
yeah.
I like the simplicity of plants. I don't know, I think in this particular case for where that's located, I would be willing to, I'm not as wedded to having art be a part of every single one, and I would be personally open to having one that's where we're more just focused on the plantings. But I also like the enthusiasm for the art, and I see these compromise things that are being suggested, so maybe we shouldn't eliminate it, but I guess I would say I would be personally willing to say, let's just focus on the plant part.
The other piece is you can always add art at a later point, so,
Budget-wise, Chuck, do we have also constraints in that area when it comes to that design of that particular roundabout?
We always have budget issues, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna say.
Dumb question.
But I would say, we have 40,000 in this year's budget. Some of that's, paying for Jane's time.
Yeah.
Some of it paid for, time at the 35th, roundabout. So, as far as what we have this year, you know, if we could do something for 25 to 30,000, we'd be lucky to get the knee wall in for that price.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I think it's more of we need to come up with a design, then come up with a cost, and then see how, you know, maybe approach council for a little bit more money, or see if we can go out and get some type of grants to fund it.
Okay,
But we need something to price out first.
yep.
Well, I do agree. I don't think anything art-wise should be anything dramatic. It should be something very simple that personally, I just would keep it one theme. I think it's too busy when you go in other things. And with the Native Americans, we do have the canoe and that focus down there. So I would just prefer to keep it agricultural if you wanted to do that, but very simple, not all the way around it, but just maybe in 2 or 3 locations, maybe 4. So it's simple. It's not the whole thing, just a little here, a little here. And
Yeah.
it's easy. But I think it's more important to decide what the plantings are going to be. And I agree that the art could be secondary in decision processes.
I feel very fortunate that we have Jane working on this project. It's clear that she understands, has quickly understood kind of some of the values that this group has been working towards and cares about, and also that she has the expertise in the plants. And I think it's just really exciting for us that we have this conversation started with Jane to go forward on this roundabout.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and I've worked for a long time with Sunrise O'Mahony, so we tag team off ideas over the last 20 years. We've tag team, plus our kids went to elementary school together, so we know each other pretty well.
So I thought I heard concept A was kind of starting to pop up in preference. Is that the only one, or I kind of heard a split opinion after you went past A?
Do you think council would prefer to see two concepts, or could we, if we are mostly leaning towards one concept, could we just give them one, or?
I think it's okay. I think, let's see, we've been to them, what, 3 times now, and each time we've given them 2 options.
Yeah,
I didn't hear them being opposed to having 2 options. I think it would help focus their discussion if there's just one, because there was a lot of behind-the-scene conversations with them when there were 2.
yeah. I do think one advantage of only sending forward one is that council is spread very thin over very many topics right now, and they're having study sessions more often than they ever used to have to, because there's so much work on their plate. And I think this group has had the energy and time to devote to thinking about these. So I would be okay with sending forward just concept A, but I really definitely want our group to agree on that, if that's what we do.
I love concept A. I'm fine suggesting that. Do we want to suggest it with any art or no art? Or another idea I just had would be, instead of art, we could add sort of an artistic element by just having some sort of interesting, the knee wall built out of some sort of interesting material rather than just plain concrete. Like the manufactured natural stone that is on the exterior of a lot of buildings around here. It could add a little bit of color and a natural look without us actually having to commission artwork. So what do we think?
Yeah. I'm gonna see if Dan wants to.
Well,
Just trying to get at everybody.
Things just keep changing, I know.
Yeah.
I like the vertical design. Driving through there, I think a vertical green would be good. I'm interested in the historic element. I don't, maybe there's another opportunity in the future.
I guess
I
one,
don't-
oh, sorry.
Yeah. I think texture of some kind might be nice. I don't know. The flat look is functional.
Yeah.
So I guess, I know you're starting to work toward almost a statement of preference. I also know that you have a committee member who is absent tonight who probably want the opportunity to take part in any recommendation. Do you want to give direction to staff and to Jane to come back next month with somebody other than me kind of running the show here, but with something based on concept A and some other trade-offs or ideas that you want to work into a rendering, and then focus your attention next month at making a recommendation?
Just as an aside question, would it be possible to run this by Park and Rec? Because at one time you said, I think at the last meeting you said they're going to have to review some of these things. Would be nice to get their opinion on A, since we're all leaning towards that direction, to see if they have any negative
Well, there's a kind of a dichotomy of opinion going on here internally.
Oh.
We have a very engaged park and trail manager, Corey Crownhart, and he definitely wants to have some part in this. I've had to remind him that the middle of a roundabout is not a park, and so we don't have to have Parks and Recreation weigh in. Although I'm sure he would have no problem offering his opinion. And so, and it might just be that he takes over my role in facilitating this committee. So it's one that we have to make decisions this week on this and other things that I have to transition out of, which is kind of the other reason why I was trying to not have you jump to a recommendation at this point. I can
Okay.
tell you
Okay.
the next two council agendas are really full, so I wouldn't even be able to get it to council until July anyway.
Well, here's a question I had. I think I remember, last year we took a month break because we don't have to meet every month of the year. And I believe we maybe did we take July off last year?
I think we did.
I think you took one of the months. It might have been July for a variety of reasons, and I think there was homework. And I think the homework was to go look at some other roundabouts or some
Yeah.
ideas that would feed the 35th roundabout.
Right.
This might be an opportunity to do that.
I also thought it'd be an opportunity for the dust to settle after your departure and the transition. I just thought, whoever this new person is gonna be, maybe we all have a breather for July and then come back in August. And as long as we're not, like, nobody's waiting on us to imminently have this in front of them, then that was gonna be one of my topics tonight, was like, should we take July off? And plan to meet again in August. Which would give us time to digest it. It would give Tim a chance to understand the conversation. I do think one thing that we might be able to do is, when we do get to a proposal, the horticultural, I guess, concept could stay A, but maybe one of the things we ask council about is what is their opinion about having some sort of low-key art or, texturing in the knee wall or something to give it more dimension, because I think both of those ideas could be something that council might have opinions on.
I like that idea, because one thing that could happen in July, since council will meet, is having Jane kind of evolve concept A to a point where we could have a temperature check with council.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah, and I can take this from a simple sketch to actually using some materials and textures with actual images. So you can start to really get a better sense of what this could look like in a couple of versions of A, with a textured wall versus the plain wall. I think the new wall on Pioneer is kind of that same pinkish color. So you have lots of that kind of general color, and then all of a sudden you can have all this height to it. So I can start to play with the textures and colors and get you some closer images to what it could look like.
Yeah.
So if you like A, then I think maybe the next step is to take A and try out a couple of different textures that council can really start to. Obviously, as soon as you go to a textured concrete, there goes the price, goes up, and it takes much more manpower to whatever the texturing is, especially on a circular surface, as opposed to a flat wall. It's easier to get a textured, so the price goes up a lot because it's more manual labor. But that's an investment that the city may want to make. So, but
Okay.
knowing that each of your roundabouts has different character, you've done stone walls, you've done the vineyard look. I don't know if you've done it on a different type of textured concrete yet.
I think we've just done what's over by Clark College, which is more of a lighting, it's a glorified sign, I think, for Clark College. And we really don't have knee walls. Roundabouts, unfortunately, have been flattened, they've put boulders in them like ones with the grapevines. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, people on Pioneer decide they want to drive straight through our roundabouts. And this one at Royal and Wells, we just haven't had the issue there. Maybe our driver's a little bit more sober on that part of town than on
That's good to
Pioneer.
know.
I mean, to keep the cost under control, you could keep the knee wall simple and put some couple boulders on top of the knee wall, like you were mentioning. That's a low cost, visually blends in with the trees to make it, once again, intentional to look natural. Once again, that errand driver may try to skip over a knee wall, but will be stopped by a large boulder.
Sounds good.
And there's, can't you also texturize concrete? You can just do a texture, or you can, I've seen things on the freeway where they look like boulders,
Exactly.
you know, so it's not, you know, you don't have to apply anything, it's just the way the texture looks.
That's what they were talking
Oh,
about.
they were?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's the thing she said, adds cost, though.
oh, okay. I thought she was meaning the actual implant, you know, like you do on the front of a house. You put,
No, those are on Pioneer.
oh, okay.
Yeah, you're
That's
right,
what
I
I was
thought that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if the Google guy, if you drop the little Google guy at the Clark College one, if that has a most current picture.
You have access to the Google guy?
The Google Map guy? If you go to Google Maps,
It's maps.google.com.
in the bottom.
Oh, that little yellow guy.
Oh, yep, they haven't driven that yet, so. I'll get some pictures of it.
We'll get that, so if that's an option you want to take a look at as some type of texture. I don't know that that's concrete, it might be stamped, like brick-looking concrete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not giving us the street view. We'll figure something out here.
So I can take concept A and add more realistic look to it, and maybe from a couple of different angles. So you can see how it does block the view of a driver, so that you're not getting the headlight impact at night, and start to get a better sense of what this could look like. And you know, we can click things on, turn layers on and off of, add boulders, add logs, take those off, and put on a texture, and we can just have an interactive conversation about what look, and fine tune that look. You're not getting to pick the paint color of your kitchen kind of level.
But, so is is the idea then, Chuck, are you thinking that Jane will, as she's developed that, that'll go to council, and then by the next time we meet in August, we will know what council's thinking about the concept?
Yeah, it just is a kind of a temperature check. We did that
Yeah.
with 35th, if you remember.
Definitely.
I was looking to see, there is an image, where is it?
Okay.
Ridgefield Roundtable, if you go into Pioneer Street Extension Project, it actually has pictures of that roundabout. Some interesting, yeah.
that's a brick, a stone face. Stone face wall.
That's fancy, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you also have a stone face wall on Pioneer Street as well, which, you know, you could do a taller wall that the plants could go. Once again, you're just adding costs the higher up you go with your wall and your architecture pieces, but
There's probably a limit to height because we do have some manholes and service entrances and valve can lids that we have to, yeah, we can't raise them up that high. It just won't work. So probably the knee wall of 2 feet is about the limit that we could do unless there's something that is a taller wall, but whatever's behind it doesn't need height. Or you do what we're doing at Pioneer Discovery Drive, you build a pedestal and put art on top of it.
Yeah.
and being that you have utilities on the west, south, and east side, that just leaves the north side with no utility access points. So that kind of really limits where you put those structural elements. Although that's beautiful for Clark College. Yes, yes.
Would it be less expensive to just embed something in the knee wall? Like if you had something, a design?
Once again, it comes down to the labor cost.
Yeah.
Anything,
Instead of, having someone do, say, a metal sculpture in different areas, you could just put that in the knee wall. Or
once
design
again,
it and-
yeah, it's a manual labor cost that goes up anytime you do something fancy with concrete beyond the form. So
Right.
typically you just put the wood forms out and you pour the concrete in. Doesn't mean you can't put something in the form, so when they pour the concrete, which I think they did down on the waterfront in Vancouver, the forms that they set had a pattern in it. I think of salmon. Of course, we do salmon so well here. That's another thing, is that the concrete form has a piece of architecture to it.
We just
I don't know
do,
if that's more expensive, that might be less expensive.
we just do birds that eat the salmon here in Ridgefield. So.
Yes, we could do, have the osprey flying low with the salmon in its talon here, or something. Once again, it just comes down to the artist to create the art that you want on the form, then the manual labor to give it more care than a typical just straight form. Just a cost.
So it sounds like we're headed toward taking a break in July, let council have some time to do a temperature check. Does anybody on the committee want to maybe do a progress print check of what Jane works on between now and then? Probably not a quorum of the committee, but one or two of you probably would.
I'd be willing, for sure.
Me too. Or your artist there maybe.
What's a,
Would be better.
I think he's, go ahead.
what's a progress print check?
It's basically, before we send anything to council for a temperature check, she's going to print it out, and that's a progress print. So it's
We're
basically
gonna see
here.
her update, basically.
But before we send it to council, the offer was to take a kind of a preliminary version of that and just take a look at what the options she has before it goes. That's really what a progress print check would be.
Oh, okay.
So probably just mid-July. I'm gone the first week of July visiting family back east, but by mid-July I can have the next set of drawings available. So whether it comes to this as a formal committee, but if you're not meeting, then I can meet with a couple of you, like this is where we're at so far. Based on all the comments that we received today, it seems like it's pretty straightforward to move forward.
And so we probably won't have an official agenda item at council in July. What we'll probably do is have Steve Stewart run a concept in front of council in his briefings that he does, the 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 briefings, probably the week of the July 24th meeting. And so ideally, we want to have something a week before just to make sure we're ready to print it off, and Steve's had a chance to take a look and kind of get his read before it goes live.
so Steve would do the temperature check with the thing. I'd definitely be available to do that in mid-July. It sounds like you
could
would be.
be, unless
Does
she
anybody
would
else
prefer-
want to do it? It's not a requirement. It's probably with two of us, that's enough, but if you're wanting to see it before it goes to council,
I think I'm all right.
you're all right?
Yeah.
Dan?
It's all right.
Okay. All right, so Kathleen and I will figure it out with Jane. Um,
Are you sure you really are passionate about the trees?
Well, yeah, seems like I'm getting what I want.
Yeah.
Which is trees.
Okay. I think we probably have fully addressed our business, unless anybody has anything else they want to add, or Jane has any final questions for us, or?
No, I thank you for the opportunity to support your work, and I know there's lots going on in Ridgefield right now, and it's a great opportunity to support all the amazing things that are happening here in this town, and any in-between comments, or usually folks think of stuff as we're heading to the parking lots. You know, Chuck and his team can forward those comments to me as you think of them.
Okay.
No problem. I'm a sole proprietor, so my business is on 24/7. So I'll get those comments and make sure to incorporate them if you think of something after the fact.
Okay. All right, then, I guess we are staff reports. Mr. Green, do we have any staff reports?
We do.
Oh, cool.
Late last week, I received I'll call them construction drawings from PBS for the 35th Avenue roundabout that has the landscape features in the middle. I was wondering if anybody would like to take a look at those. I'd be happy to share them.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would love to,
All right,
and Kelly would like to.
Yeah.
okay. They also did a cost estimate. I don't know if you want me to forward that one to you. It's rather expensive, so.
So there's probably gonna have to be some
Well,
adjustment.
we'll have to, yeah, that one's gonna be a full-blown project, but,
I send the cost estimate. I'd be
All right.
interested just to see how that breaks down, just not being so much in the know about how these things work. That'd be interesting for me.
okay. Well, that's all I had.
I'd be interested as well. I'd just send it out to the group.
Well, I could send it to the whole committee, just don't, we'll do what we normally do and send it with BCCs. So if you reply all, you're just replying to Diana. Which I'll do that
And then
work on,
is there a time frame within which you wanna hear back from us about it?
probably before June 30th.
Yeah.
You'll find that the cost estimate's quite high, a lot higher than I thought it was going to be, but this is kind of like what needs to be done to do the whole thing.
Okay.
But then it just means we're gonna have to figure out where to find, probably write a big size grant to get that funded.
Okay. Okay, any other staff reports? All right, committee, are there things that you brought this evening in terms of topics that we need to touch on?
Well, is this your last meeting, Chuck?
Oh,
This is my last meeting.
Well, I really appreciated your support and learning about Robert and his rules, and it's been, yeah, we'll miss you.
Yes.
And best wishes on your next ventures.
Well, my next adventure is going to make sure that my wife doesn't clobber me for taking on a consulting gig. I won't be doing that. I'm retiring. But I've appreciated this committee's existed for about a year and a half, and it's evolved quite a bit in that year and a half. But I'd say the five of you have probably worked my favorite makeup of this committee is the five that are, well, 4 plus Tim, that are sitting here now. I really appreciated the time, and just seeing you guys just so passionate about this. That is just refreshing. And I'll be around. We're not going anywhere. We still live in the community, so you'll probably see me at a Raptors game or something. Actually, you will. I'm throwing out the first pitch at some game in July.
Oh, nice.
I think it's the 25th, but I'm waiting to get confirmation from the Raptors.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
well, I want to echo Dan. Thank you so much for catching that, Dan, because you have been an excellent guide for us, Chuck. Very patient, very understanding, and helpful every step of the way, and just, it's been an education for all of us, and a great opportunity to try and contribute to the city. So thank you for being our guide.
Yeah, hear, hear.
Yes, thank you very much. I
Thank you
second
so
that.
much. Yeah,
Let's make a motion.
approved.
All right. Well, at this point, if there's nothing else, I
No.
would say our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chuck.
Everybody. Thank you, Chuck.
I don't know much about any of this stuff, you know, at all, but it's just listening how he can, we'll be kind of disjointed and going in different directions. Suddenly we're together and because he makes one sentence, you know,